everybody. We're making trifle tonight. It's Thursday and we're at Now You're Cooking, so obviously we're doing a cooking demo. Tonight we're making a trifle, as I said. It's got a lot of bits and pieces. If you were making this, which you will be when you see how easy it is, you're not going to make this all at one time and then make your trifle and serve it. You've got to make your cake ahead of time. You're going to want to make your pudding ahead of time. So it's actually really nice because you spread out your jobs as you go along and then you end up with this gorgeous thing. But I do want to show you how to make a sponge cake and how to make a pudding, so we are going to do that all right now. And then through the magic of television, I'll already have a cake and a pudding already made for you. So starting with the sponge cake, we have 4 eggs, 120 grams of sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And this is one of the things where you really want to weigh out your ingredients if you can. If you don't have a kitchen scale, I highly recommend it. They're awesome for baking. If you were to take a scoop of sugar or a cup of sugar and I took a cup of sugar or flour or whatever, I guarantee they wouldn't weigh the same. So in order to get a really consistent end product, you want to weigh out your ingredients, your dry ingredients. So what I have here are the eggs, room temperature eggs, super important. I took them out of the refrigerator last night when I left work around 5:30 and just left them out all day today. If you forget to do that, you can put them in a bowl of warm water and just let them sit in the warm water for a couple of hours until they warm up a little bit. You don't want them hot, you don't want them cooked, but you want them room temperature. So I have just whisked this with my beautiful Smeg mixer for about 10 minutes or so. Got lots of good air in there. And now I am going to add the flour. And for Moira and David Rose, if you're watching, this is how you fold in flour or fold in an ingredient. So I'm going to add the flour in about thirds. And I'm just going to sift it onto the top of my eggs and sugar and vanilla here. And you want it sifted because you really want this to be super light and fluffy when it goes into the oven. So folding, pardon me, folding is done like this. You just really gently stir. You want to keep the air bubbles in the egg. That's really, really important to the rise and to the fluffiness of your sponge. The sponge being your cake, sponge cake or sponge. If you watch the Great British Baking Show, you know they almost always refer to the cakes as sponges. So that's pretty well folded in. And we'll take another third. And again, this is 120 grams of flour weighed out on a kitchen scale. And kitchen scales are great because you can put on a bowl and then zero it out or tear it out. Add your flour. If you're doing a couple of weighted ingredients, you can tear it out again, add your sugar, and so on and so forth. So they make it really easy. You don't have to do a whole lot of math to bake well, which for me is a good thing. So you'll see there are a couple little pockets of flour, and you just want to find those and gently, gently stir them in or fold them in. And that's pretty good. And I just have a little more flour here. Okay. And again, just gently, gently. You can use a wooden spoon. I really highly recommend these spoonulas, which are kind of a spoon-shaped spatula, because you're sort of spooning, but you are also scraping the bowl as you go, and it really makes it much easier. And normally, I would prep my pan ahead, but I wanted to show you how to prep your pan. This is a non-stick what do you call it? Thank you, springform pan. I'm having a moment. You can use a regular cake pan. You probably want to put a parchment circle in the bottom. But even though it's non-stick, I'm going to butter it a little bit. Just have some warm butter on a paper towel. I don't recommend using sprays because the sprays have stuff in them that is not great for your nonstick pan. But the butter is great. And then I'm going to put a little flour in, and I'm just going to coat the pan as best I can. I don't want too much flour, but we want it a little bit on there, and that's really going to help. If you don't have a nonstick pan, this is imperative. If you have a nonstick, you're probably okay. Sorry, I know you can't see that, but so there we go. And then I'm going to get rid of that. And we don't want a lot of excess flour in there. So it's going all over the place, but that's okay. Now I'm going to put my batter in here, and I'm going to pour it fairly evenly. But because we don't want to lose the air, oops, there's a little flour. That's okay, that'll cook in. I'm not gonna, sometimes you bang the cake on the counter to kind of even it out, or you shake it or whatever. We don't want to do that because we don't want to risk losing any of our bubbles, air bubbles in there. So that's going right into the oven just like that. And it's going in at 350, and it's going for about 20 to 25 minutes. And that is your cake going. So next, we're going to start on, and you don't want to open the oven at all until the timer goes off. You don't want to risk jostling it and letting any of those air bubbles out. So that is your sponge cake. And moving right along to our pudding. I made a chocolate pudding for our trifle for tonight. You can make this, I put on the recipe that you could add some cocoa if you want to, cocoa powder to it. You don't have to, you can just make vanilla. So what we're going to do is we're going to put milk, so we have 3 cups of milk. I took out about 1/4 cup and I put it in a bowl with some cornstarch. I'm putting the rest of the milk into a saucepan and turn the heat on medium high, somewhere in that area. And I am going to add my sugar, 3/4 cup of sugar. And I am going to add a pinch of salt. Pinch of salt. And I'm going to just let this cook for a little while, and I'm going to whisk it. This is an awesome whisk because of the shape of it. These pieces get right into the corner, if you will. It's not a corner because it's not square, but where it comes down, this really gets in there, so you're not like burning anything in the corners, and it's really great for that. Pudding, so any of these things, you can buy a cake at the store, but it's great to know how to make a simple sponge cake. You can buy pudding mix, but homemade pudding is so easy to make, and it's so good. You can serve it with crushed up cookies or fresh fruit or whatever you want, and it just makes a really nice dessert, and it's easy to do. It's pretty healthy. It's milk. It's got a couple of egg yolks in it, but it's a really nice skill to have under your belt if you like to cook. It's a great weeknight dessert for family. You can make it really fun and kind of fancy for guests if you want to make a little fruit compote or something. So we're going to let that heat up. So while that's going, I'll tell you, we have coming up next week, Jen Lagnini from Turtle Rock Farm is going to be here, and she's going to be making pickles. She's going to show you how to make refrigerator pickles, which you can keep in the refrigerator for, I think she says 4 weeks or something like that, or you can can them, and she'll show us how to can them as well. And then after that, I believe we're going to be making Caesar salad with Betsy Fair. Mike's wife, Betsy, is going to be here, and that's going to be really fun too. Make a little Caesar salad with a really traditional dressing with anchovies and everything, which you don't have to have if you don't like anchovies, but they add a certain je ne sais quoi. So that's what's coming up soon. I don't think there's any. Is there anything Bath Main Street happening? We have Kindness Day coming up next month.
There's concerts every Friday.
Concerts every Friday, concerts every Wednesday down on the waterfront, or every Saturday down on the waterfront. All right, this is getting really close. It's starting to sizzle a little bit. It's starting to steam a little bit. I'm just going to give it just a couple more minutes. You don't want it to boil. You don't want to really scorch the milk. I'm just cheating and looking at my recipes here. And okay. So next what we're going to do is we're going to temper the egg yolks. If you just put your egg yolks into the hot milk, you're going to get milk with scrambled egg in it, which is not going to be very pretty. So I'm just going to take, I don't know if you can get in here, Heather. I'm going to take my hot milk and sugar, and I am just going to put a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time in here. So it's warming up the eggs, but it's not cooking the eggs. I'm making a good mess here. And then, so now the eggs are nice and warm. They're mixed with the milk, so they're not going to cook as soon as I put them in. But I'm going to start whisking the milk, and I'm going to pour them very slowly. Okay, so that's going to help to thicken and make a custard. At the same time, I'm going to turn that down to low. Make sure I have everything here that I'm supposed to. Yep, and now the other nice thing about this whisk is it stands up, so it doesn't get all hot and burn your hands. This is my cornstarch and milk, making sure that's all. So when you add cornstarch to a liquid, you have to mix it with water or milk or something before you add it. And you generally want to add it to a hot liquid. Doesn't have to be, but it's kind of a general rule. And then we're whisking that in. And this is going to start thickening up here in just a sec. And I'm turning the heat back up just a little bit. And the recipe says that it only needs a teaspoon of vanilla, but we're going to put in a tablespoon because we want this to be nice and vanilla-y. So trifle, we're making it with cherries tonight. You can make it with any kind of fruit, any kind of seasonal fruit. You can use jam. My grandmother used to make a tipsy laird, which was or is a Scottish trifle with apricot preserves, lots and lots of apricot brandy. And I think she made a creme pâtissière for it, or creme anglaise instead of pudding. You can do that too. And it had to have slivered almonds, not sliced. It had to be slivered almonds. And that was a great favorite in my family growing up whenever she would make that. The laird being Scottish for lord, so the tipsy laird with lots of good apricot brandy. Okay, this is starting to thicken. It's not super thick yet, but it's getting there. And it's hot. I can feel it now in my hands. So I am going to add a little bit of butter. I'm going to actually turn the heat off. I'm going to add a little bit of butter and whisk that in. That just gives it some richness. And I should be using a measuring spoon, but I'm going to guesstimate a tablespoon, and that's probably a little more than a tablespoon, but that's okay. It's going to be a nice vanilla-y. Oh, I can smell it. Oh, it smells great. So there's our pudding. So if you use, I use the whole milk. If you use skim milk or use nut milk or oat milk or something like that, it's going to be a bit more runny. It doesn't really matter if it's runny in the tipsy laird. If you want it a little thicker, use just a little bit less milk, but make sure that you use the whole milk for a nice thick custard or a nice thick pudding. Okay, then, absolutely imperative, as soon as it's done cooking, you want to take a piece of plastic wrap. It's easier if you put this into a bowl because I'm probably going to burn myself doing this, but I just want to do this quickly and move on to the next step. You want to put plastic wrap and you want it to be right on the surface of the pudding. Otherwise, you get a skim on the top of it. So I'll redo this after we're done filming and it's a little cooler and make sure it's fully covered. But you want the plastic wrap right on the surface of the pudding. And then we're going to set that aside and let it cool. So these are the two pieces that you want to make ahead of time so that when you're ready to put your trifle together, you've got your cake, which I took a little nibble out of. Might be a little hot still. Thank you, Heather. Thank God for Heather keeping an eye on me here. So I made this a couple days ago. I took a little taste out of it. We don't have mice. And it tasted very good. It's a little dry. So I am going to add some simple syrup, which I made a little earlier today, which is just water and sugar, and I added some kirsch to it because we're not serving any young children. So we are going to just brush a little kirsch on, and it's just going to give a little moistness and a little more flavor to the cake. You do not have to do this. It's not in the recipe. I just thought I would do it because I can. Okay, and it doesn't really matter if your cake is dry because it's going to absorb all of the wet stuff that we're putting into the trifle. And it doesn't matter if it's soggy because it's going to get soggy. So I'm going to just cut this into some pieces. And I am just about ready to start assembling my trifle. The most important thing to know about assembling a trifle is it doesn't matter how you do it. It's completely up to you. I think usually it's cake, pudding, fruit, whipped cream. Oh, I got to start the whipped cream. But it doesn't really matter how you do that. Okay, so whipped cream. Thank goodness we have two mixers here. Nice ice cold cream. In it goes, splattering everywhere. I'm going to put in a little powdered sugar. And I'm going to just put like 2 tablespoons. And get that going. You usually want to start your mixer on a low speed and slowly work up. I'm going to put some kirsch, cherry, brandy, good healthy serving of that in there. Again, we're not serving this to kids. We're all adults here. And we'll get that whipping and hopefully you can still hear me. So I'm going to do this a little differently tonight. I'm going to put some chocolate pudding because you can't have too much chocolate and cherries. And I'm going to put that on the bottom for a little base. And then I'm going to put in some of the cake. And then I'm going to put in some cherries. These cherries I pitted this morning with this really awesome cherry pitter. I've never used one before. Cherry pitter here. You just put your cherry in and press down. You get your pit and you get your cherry, and they're delicious. And it's so easy and it's awesome. So these have a little bit of sugar on them, about 2 tablespoons of sugar, and another good dollop of kirsch because why not? So I'm making sure I get some of the juice in here to soak into the cake, which I keep wanting to call bread for some reason. And I'm using about half. I used about half my cake. I haven't used half my pudding yet, but we'll make sure we use all the pudding. get our whipped cream going. Get this guy out of the way. And you want stiff peaks on this, or almost stiff peaks, which means that when you lift up the whisk attachment, the peaks stay up, the little peaks that you make when you lift it up. And it's just going to be another minute. It's really quick. And you can see already it's starting to hold its shape from the whisk. And we're just about there. We're pretty close. I think that's going to do it. So you can see where the tip came out. It's all just holding its shape there. So that is stiff peaks. We have a lot of dishes tonight. That's okay. All right, so I'm going to put whipped cream. What's that?
2 cakes is worth it.
I'm going to put the whipped cream in, and hopefully this is going to work. I'm going to stick these to the wall. And this is just, you don't have to do this. This is just to make it all fancy. Spread that out a little bit. And this is going to be so yummy. Chocolate and cherries, my favorite combinations. And then the whipped cream and the cake. How can you go wrong? Okay, and so again, my pudding has been chilled. I made it yesterday. It's chilled overnight. Put a little bit more in there. It's okay if it looks messy because it's going to taste really good. Here's more pudding for us. And another layer of cake. The staff is going to be so psyched. They get trifle, and they get pudding, and they get cake tomorrow. They're good perks to working here. We are hiring right now. If anybody loves to cook and loves our store and wants to be part of our really fun team, we'd love to have you bring in an application. We have them right up at the front counter. And we like to celebrate staff birthdays, which is another perk. And we like to cook and share our creations. All right, look at that. My God, it's overflowing with goodness. This is going to be, I don't know, it's pretty crazy. But it doesn't matter. That's the beauty of the trifle. Use whatever fruit you've got. If you've got frozen peaches, or you've got fresh pears from your garden, or apples. If you have pears and apples, you might want to cook them up a little, make a little compote. Look at that. Holy cow. Who doesn't want a bite of that? Yeah. Yeah, baby. And then let's see if we can just drizzle or dollop. Nope, we can't. It's okay. Still looks good, right? And then we'll put some pretty cherries with their stems still in all the way around, just to make it look like a sundae. So this is going to sit before we eat it. We're going to let this sit probably. You want to make this before dinner, put it in the refrigerator, so that all those nice juices can soak into the cake part. And that doesn't look so bad. I think it looks pretty. And yeah, so just let it kind of meld, let all the flavors meld. And then when you serve it, just serve it in dessert bowls with with a spoon and let people go at it. It's going to be really good. Any kind of fruit, like I said, berries are awesome, especially when they're fresh. Put a little sugar on them to get the syrup out of them. You can make chocolate cake. You can use angel food cake. You can buy a cake. You can buy your pudding. You can get the whipped cream that comes in a can, whatever works for you. But it's great to know how to make your own sponge and make your own pudding. And that looks fantastic. And we're going to have to probably have a little spoonful of that before we go home tonight. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for Summer Pickles with Jen from Turtle Rock Farm. Thanks again.